Have you ever encountered true evil? How? My kids went to visit their mom in the UK on a court-ordered visit. I knew what was going to happen, but couldn't prevent the visit. Sure enough, rather than put them on a plane back to me in the USA, she went on the run with them and her boyfriend. I got a lot of help from the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the US State Department, and the Scottish government paid all my legal fees over there. During the 5 months she had the kids, she tried to brainwash them. She told them, if they came back to me, I would allow them to be molested and kill them. This was relentless. My son was incredibly strong and refused to believe her or cooperate. They were 13 at the time, but my daughter was much easier to manipulate. I really don't know for certain that they weren't physically abused, but a lot of the stuff she accused me of was things she and her then boyfriend, now husband, did to the children. I had to fly to Scotland to appear in a trial. I walked out of the courthouse at 9 PM on a Friday night with the children. Normal process for these cases is to have a designated handover 2 or 3 days later, but the child psychologist who interviewed us all was positive that my ex-wife would kill the children, and the judge agreed. I got them back in the clothes they stood in. I have no doubt she would indeed have killed them, rather than hand them over to me. 5 years later, she has no contact with the children. Their choice. They have anxiety and depression, but are doing remarkably well. They are high school seniors now, and they make me proud every day. I'm so glad you were able to get your kids back and keep them safe. I worked with a guy in Ontario who was always posting on Facebook that he just adopted new puppy like every 4 or 5 months. He adopted them from all different shelters and people. Had to have about 8 or 9 at one point. We went to his house for some reason and there were no dogs, no signs of dogs, no toys, no food bowls, etc. We asked about the puppies and he just offhandedly pointed to the backyard, which we noticed was full of little mounds, and said they all were sick and died. Guess he just didn't have good luck with animals. The way he said it was cold. The CSPCA investigated him and tested the remains. He was putting small amounts of his own homemade poison in the dog food and conducting his own little LD50 test. Creepy as fuck. Also, you probably left your lunch where he could mess with it in the work fridge. There was a kid in my 6th grade class who loved designing his own custom shanks and then stabbing people in the arm or back with them. He had a look of pure joy on his face when he saw that he drew blood and caused suffering to another human. He was only suspended for a week the first 2 times he did this, before they finally kicked him out of school after the 3rd time. How did this kid not get the shit beaten out of him? I get that he shanked kid, but did no one he stabbed have any friends? Back in 2011 my uncle down in Mexico had got kidnapped by one of the cartels. They gave my entire family on my dad's side a random $10,000 and we would get him back. My dad called in people who owed him money and managed to get the 10 grams. He sent it down to the family down south and they paid the ransom for my uncle. All we got in return was my uncle's lifeless body. I've told this story before about meeting a murderer. Was a journalist on weekend duty. Got called out to a story. Guy claims his car was hijacked with his 2-year-old son in it. I met him at the police station. He seemed devastated. I was devastated. I mean, I'd done plenty of grisly crime stories, but a missing kid is next level awful. Next day I had my day off. The regular crime reporter called me. They'd arrested the dad and found the little boy's body at a rubbish dump. He did it out of revenge for his wife cheating. It still bothers me to this day how I could have felt so much sympathy for this man. I shook his hand. I cried with him. I'm usually very good at picking up when someone is off. Just goes to show you, true evil disguises itself very well. That's crazy. Poor boy. I hate when parents take out their anger at the other with their child. I had a student kill 3 members of his family. I didn't not see him as any crazier as other struggling kids. It's something about our mental vocabulary not being able to imagine the possibility of that level of evil. A homeless guy with face tattoos, screaming about wanting to kill everyone, huffing out of a bag. Sure, we can get there in our brains, but thinking about things like Jeffrey Dahmer going to the grocery store asking the clerk how their day was, maybe dropping his change in the ringing kettle on the way out, holding the door for a lady with a walker, then going home and eating humans. It doesn't compute if you are the grocer. The biggest psychopath I ever met was an extremely likable, charismatic guy. Seemed genuinely nice when you talked to him. You could only tell he was a psychopath by his actions. The dude destroyed everything he touched, would relentlessly steal from people. I don't think he was particularly violent, as far as I know, but he had no scruples about taking advantage of other people's kindness to get what he wanted. Kindness which was never in short supply for him, since everyone liked him so much, until they found themselves living with him for a while, which was often because he was essentially homeless and schmozzed his way into sleeping on other people's couches. The point is, you won't always know if there's something off about someone. Last I heard, he was being a sugar baby. He's straight BTW for an old lonely rich gay guy. Superficially charismatic schoolmate. The more you dug, the uglier she became. She enjoyed screwing up people's lives, even people she didn't even know. This is a period before Star 69 was a thing, when you could still make prank phone calls. I watched her call a number out of the phone book, begin crying on cue, and telling the old woman who answered that her son and daughter-in-law and grandchildren had all died in a fiery car wreck. This was around 1 AM on a Friday night. She hung up the phone immediately and was all any chips left. I'm hungry. While we all stared at her open-mouthed. About 10 years ago I was walking in the city when I saw a motorcade of police stop in front of the courthouse. Tall, classy guy in handcuffs comes out, escorted by police. Gives me a wink and a smile. Confident. I thought it was just some other finance mogul who took it too far. Saw him in the news a week later. Guy stabbed and killed his 2 young children in a bathtub to get back at this cheating ex. I felt like my aunt was pretty evil, and she was a kindergarten teacher no less. She pulled my arm out of its socket one time when I was 4, and she was helping me cross the road. I visited her when I was 16, and every opportunity she got she would whisper in my ear, "You are worthless. You are nothing," and just keep walking. The visit ended with her trying to strangle me after I took issue with her trying to force feed my brother Ginger, and that was the last time my family spoke to her. I remember fantasizing about getting back at her in some way for a while, but then moved on with my life and grew up. Years later, she was being her typical self with my uncle, her brother, and berating him, calling him worthless, and he shot her in the head, killing her. It was a real tragedy for the family as he shot himself afterwards as well, but I certainly have not missed my aunt.